My daughter told 180 wedding guests that I was responsible for her mother's death. Not in direct words, but Caroline, standing in her $15,000 gown, claimed I was a useless failure who let her mom die because I was too poor to save her. She said Mom passed away ashamed of the man she married, and that she was thankful her new husband's family had real wealth, unlike her disappointing father. None of it was true. I sat quietly at table 12 in the back, watching her dismantle 8 years of my silence. The Sterlings nodded in agreement, their hedge fund friends smirked, and no one looked at the grieving widower. I took a slow sip of water, carefully setting the glass down. Caroline had no idea I had $33 million in my Chase account. She was about to learn why you never embarrass the quiet man in the corner. And trust me, you'll want to hear what happened next. This is the story of how we arrived here, and how my own daughter used her mother's death for social standing. My name is Matt Thompson. I'm 62. For 3 decades, I worked as a military contractor on highly classified defense projects, work that paid extremely well, but required top security clearance and absolute secrecy about wealth. Margaret. My wife and I raised Caroline in a modest 3-bedroom home in Stamford, Connecticut. We drove second-hand cars, shopped at Target, and vacationed at the Jersey Shore instead of Europe. Not because we lacked money, but because Margaret believed our daughter needed to learn the value of it. Don't spoil Caroline, she'd always remind me. Let her build character first. Margaret was a kindergarten teacher, 28 years at the same elementary school, earning about $45,000 a year. She could have retired after my contracts began paying well, but she loved her work and said it kept her grounded. Caroline never knew we were wealthy. To her, Dad worked some secret government computer job, and Mom was a teacher. We seemed middle class, sometimes lower middle class when things were tight, but everything shifted in 2014. During a routine self-exam, Margaret found a lump in her breast. Stage 2 invasive ductal carcinoma. Doctors estimated maybe 18 months with standard treatment. I refused to settle for maybe. I liquidated everything. Sold my shares in 3 defense startups I had co-founded. Cashed out a Pentagon consulting retainer worth $2.3 million a year. Called every contact I knew in military medicine. We tried experimental immunotherapy at Johns Hopkins, $180,000 per cycle. Proton beam radiation at Mass General, $95,000 each session. Clinical trials in Switzerland, $40,000 just for the consultation. Caroline saw me write check after check. She watched our accounts drained and saw me sell the home we'd lived in for 15 years to cover treatments not covered by insurance. Dad's spending everything trying to save Mom, she told her friends. And she wasn't wrong. In just 2 years, medical bills totaled $2.1 million. But here's what she didn't see: the money flowing back in. 3 months after Margaret's diagnosis, the Pentagon granted me the largest cyber defense project in military history, $47.5 million over 5 years, fully classified. 6 months later, one of my startups went public. Though I'd technically sold my shares, they had been converted into restricted stock. Once the lockup expired, those shares were worth $31.2 million. A year later, Northrop Grumman acquired another firm I had helped build, triggering royalty payments in my consulting deal, $18.7 million in one check. By late 2015, when Margaret entered hospice, I had more wealth than I ever imagined. But I couldn't tell her, couldn't tell Caroline. The Pentagon contracts required strict financial secrecy until 2019. Margaret passed away on January 15, 2016. Caroline was 25 at the time. At the funeral, she stood and spoke about how Dad had spent everything trying to save Mom, how we'd lost our home and our savings. But at least, she said, Mom knew how deeply Dad loved her. I let her believe that story. For 8 years, Caroline thought we were broke, that her father had failed to save her mother despite spending every last dollar. She built her life around that belief. Caroline found a marketing job making $65,000 a year. She rented a small studio apartment in Manhattan for $2,800 a month. She began dating men from finance and consulting, guys who made real money. Meanwhile, I lived as if I had nothing. I bought a small condo in Stamford for $180,000 cash, but told Caroline I was just renting. I drove my old 2012 Honda Civic, shopped at the same Target, ate in the same diners. Yet, somehow, her student loan balances dropped every month. Her credit card bills disappeared on their own. When she needed a deposit for a new apartment, an anonymous cashier's check would arrive in her mailbox. She never questioned how these things happened. In 2019, Caroline started dating Reginald Sterling, a hedge fund analyst from a family whose wealth came from railroad investments 3 generations back. The Sterlings lived in a 12-bedroom estate in Greenwich, drove matching Range Rovers, and spent their summers in the Hamptons. Caroline felt like she had stepped into her dream life. At last, she was with someone who had real class. From the start, the Sterlings looked down on me. At dinners, they'd make remarks about Caroline's modest upbringing and how lucky she was to be joining their family. Reginald's father, Whitman Sterling Jr., once told me at a Christmas party that he respected how I'd managed with limited means. I smiled, thanked him, and let it pass. Caroline never knew what her mother actually said about her in those final weeks, conversations where morphine stripped away Margaret's filters, and she spoke with brutal honesty about our daughter's character. Caroline was about to learn why you should never assume the quiet one in the room doesn't hold the final card. The wedding was everything Caroline wanted. The Ashworth Estate Country Club in Greenwich, $85,000 just to book the venue. 180 guests in designer outfits, sipping $200 bottles of champagne. I wore my best suit, a 6-year-old $200 navy blue from Men's Warehouse. Caroline had even asked me not to embarrass her by renting something more expensive. The ceremony was stunning. Caroline looked radiant in her $15,000 Vera Wang gown. Reginald could have walked out of a Ralph Lauren ad in his $4,000 custom tux. I walked her down the aisle, gave her away to the man she loved, and smiled for the photographer when asked to look like a proud father. And I was proud, at least until the dinner began. The Sterlings had placed me at table 12, tucked away near the kitchen doors. My companions: Reginald's elderly great-aunt, half-deaf in one ear, and a couple of distant cousins who had clearly drawn the short straw. Caroline, of course, sat at the head table in front, decorated with $500 worth of white orchids, laughing with Reginald and his father, fully part of their world. During cocktail hour, I overheard the conversations, Princeton friends talking about summer homes in Martha's Vineyard, hedge fund managers comparing Ferrari collections, bankers complaining about their kids' $60,000 a year private schools. One groomsman asked Caroline how she had managed to escape her circumstances. She laughed and replied, "Good genes and better taste, I guess." Then came the real moment. Caroline rose to give her speech. She tapped her champagne flute, and the room went quiet. All 180 eyes turned to the glowing bride in her perfect dress. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice steady. "Thank you for being here on the most important day of my life." Applause followed, polite smiles, the expected start to a wedding toast. She continued, "Growing up, I never imagined I'd end up here, married to such a wonderful man from such an accomplished family, surrounded by all of you amazing people." More applause. I took a slow sip of water, but I have to be honest. My childhood wasn't easy. My father. She paused, locking eyes with me. My father tried, but he never really achieved much. The room grew quieter. Guests cast uneasy glances toward my table. After my mother died, well, grief didn't bring out the best in him. He let go of success, of ambition, of providing. I'm ashamed to say there were times I felt embarrassed by him, his working-class background, his acceptance of mediocrity instead of striving for more. Across the room, Reginald's father nodded. Several Sterling relatives exchanged satisfied looks. I used to wonder at night what my mother would think if she could see how far he had fallen after she passed. Whether she'd be disappointed in the man she married? Something cold settled in me. Caroline was weaponizing her mother's memory against me in front of 180 people. But then, she said, smiling at the Sterlings, "I met Reginald, and through him I found this family, a family that showed me what real success looks like, what it means to have standards, to build something meaningful. Whitman, Patricia, thank you for welcoming me. You've shown me it's possible to rise above where you come from." She lifted her glass toward them, for proving that class and character aren't accidents of birth, but the results of choices we make every day. Half the room stood in applause, the Sterling half. So, here's to new beginnings, to leaving the past behind, and to finally having a father figure who actually achieved something in his life. She smiled at Whitman Sterling Jr., who grinned back as if she had just handed him a trophy. And here's to my real father, sitting at table 12. He did his best with what little he had, even if it wasn't much. A few people actually laughed at the man in the cheap suit who couldn't even afford a proper table at his own daughter's wedding. Caroline raised her glass one last time. To everyone who helped me become who I am today, and to those who showed me exactly what I didn't want to become. She looked directly at me when she said it. The room filled with applause. Caroline hugged Reginald, kissed her new father-in-law on the cheek, and basked in the approval of 180 people who now thought they understood what kind of failure had raised her. I sat there in silence for 30 seconds, listening to the applause fade, watching my daughter glow with pride at publicly humiliating me. Then I reached into my jacket pocket. Caroline had no idea what I'd been carrying for 8 years, waiting for the right moment to reveal the truth. She was about to learn that some lessons cost far more than others. What I pulled out wasn't a weapon. It was something far more powerful, my wife's iPhone. The rose gold iPhone 7 Plus Margaret had used during her final weeks in hospice. I'd kept it charged for 8 years, unable to delete the last voice memo she recorded 3 days before she died. I'd listened to it only once, the night after her funeral, before locking it away. Too painful to hear again until tonight. I excused myself from table 12. Walked past the dessert station, the bar where Reginald's groomsmen ordered $50 shots of Macallan, and the photo booth where Caroline posed with her new family. I found a quiet corner near the coat check. Then pressed play. Margaret's voice, frail but steady, came through the speaker. "Matt, if you're hearing this, it means I'm gone, and you're probably thinking about playing the martyr for the rest of your life. Even dying." She knew me too well. "I need you to know some things about Caroline. Things I couldn't say when I was alive, because I hoped she'd grow out of them." I closed my eyes, listening to my late wife's confession. She's become cruel, Matt, not just selfish cruel. Last week, when the nurse helped me to the bathroom, Caroline asked when I was finally going to die so you could get back to a normal life. Those were her exact words. The words hit like ice. She told me she was embarrassed to bring friends around because of how pathetic you'd become. She said she wished she had been born into a different family, a successful family. Margaret's voice grew stronger, more urgent. I heard her on the phone with that Sterling boy. She laughed about how her working-class father would never belong in their world. She said she was glad she inherited her intelligence from my side of the family, because your genes were limited. I paused the recording, my hands shaking. When I pressed play again, Margaret was crying. "I'm scared, Matt. Not of dying, but of what she's becoming. Promise me you won't enable her with money after I'm gone. Promise me you'll make her earn her character the hard way. And if she ever dishonors my memory to make herself look better, if she ever uses my death to hurt you, then you have my permission to tell her exactly what I thought of the woman she was becoming." The message ended with a timestamp. January 12th, 2016, 11:47 p.m., 3 days before she died. I stood in that corner for 5 minutes, hearing the wedding continue behind me. Caroline's laughter rose above the music. The Sterling family held court at their tables, likely still praising her speech about rising above her circumstances. For 8 years, I'd honored Margaret's wishes. I let Caroline struggle. Let her believe we were broke. Let her think she was building character through hardship. Instead, she had built resentment, and tonight she crossed the exact line Margaret had warned me about. She dishonored her mother's memory for social approval. I walked back into the reception hall, past the dance floor, where Caroline spun in her $15,000 dress, past the Sterling family table where they planned her full acceptance into their circle. I sat down at table 12 and opened my phone, not Margaret's, but mine, on my Chase app. My checking balance showed $33,187,430. On Wells Fargo, my investment portfolio displayed $41,993,156. I had photos of my military commendations, including the Defense Superior Service Medal for the Pentagon Cyber Project. I had documents proving I owned the Sterling family estate since 2009, bought at a bankruptcy auction for $3.2 million. They had been renting it from me ever since, for $1 a year, under a charitable arrangement I'd created to protect their reputation after their fortune collapsed. I had email receipts for every anonymous payment I'd made to cover Caroline's student loans. Credit cards and rent, $247,000 in total. And I had Margaret's voice memo, time-stamped and saved in the cloud, with her explicit instruction to reveal the truth if Caroline ever crossed this line. The DJ announced the father of the bride wanted to give a speech. I hadn't requested it, but I stood anyway. Some promises to the dead matter more than keeping peace with the living. I didn't rush to the microphone. That would have been careless, emotional, something that lets your target escape with dignity. Instead, I went to the bar. "Excuse me," I said to the bartender. "Can I borrow a charger? I need my phone alive during the speeches." He handed me a portable pack. I plugged in both phones, Margaret's rose gold iPhone and my Samsung, both fully charged now. While they powered up, I opened my email app and forwarded myself a message I'd received earlier that day from my accountant. It confirmed the final details of a decision I'd been weighing for months. Next, I opened my photos and created a new album. I selected 23 images I had never shared with anyone. Bank statements going back to 2016, property deeds listing me as sole owner, screenshots of anonymous payments I'd sent to Caroline's accounts, military commendation certificates, and the Pentagon contractor identification card I'd carried for 15 years. One more step. I opened my voice recorder app and started a new recording in case anyone later questioned my state of mind or claimed I hadn't meant what I said. This is Matt Thompson. Today is September 23rd, 2024. The time is 8:47 p.m. I am of sound mind and clear judgment. What I'm about to do, I do with full awareness of the consequences. In accordance with my late wife's wishes, and in response to my daughter's public disrespect of her mother's memory. I stopped the recording and saved it with the timestamp. Meanwhile, the DJ was introducing the best man, Reginald's Princeton roommate, who entertained the guests with stories about bachelor parties in Cabo and investment banking bonuses. I used those 10 minutes to prepare my evidence in the precise order I wanted. Margaret's voice recording cued to the most damaging section. My Chase Bank statement screenshot cropped to show the balance and today's date, the property deed proving my ownership of the Sterling estate, with its symbolic $1 annual rental agreement attached, a spreadsheet I had kept for years, documenting every dollar I'd given Caroline anonymously since her mother's death, my military commendations and Pentagon contractor credentials, the email I had forwarded from my estate attorney, confirming updates to my will that would take effect upon my verbal approval. By the time the best man finished, everything was organized. 2 fully charged phones, evidence sorted, recording ready to broadcast through the sound system. Then the DJ announced the father of the bride, but I heard Caroline's voice instead. My father is a little shy about public speaking. He probably won't say anything. The room filled with nervous laughter and sympathetic nods. Many assumed the struggling widower was too timid to address such an elite crowd. I stood. "No, Caroline, I think I do have something to say." The room fell silent. Nearly 180 people turned to watch the man in a $200 suit walking to the microphone. Caroline's face turned pale. For a fleeting moment, she looked like the little girl who once apologized for breaking something valuable. But it was far too late for apologies. At the podium, I looked out at the Sterling family in their designer clothes, at Caroline in her $15,000 dress, and at the guests who had just applauded her speech about surpassing her father's limitations. I connected Margaret's phone to the venue's sound system and began to speak. "Good evening, everyone." My voice carried clearly. The microphone worked perfectly. "Thank you for being here to celebrate Caroline and Reginald's wedding." "It has been enlightening." A few polite chuckles. Caroline clutched her champagne glass so tightly it looked ready to break. I've been sitting at table 12 listening to the speeches, stories of success, accomplishment, and family heritage. It made me think of my late wife, Margaret, and what she would have thought of tonight. Caroline's eyes shifted nervously toward the exits. Reginald rested a hand on her shoulder, though he looked confused by my calm, steady demeanor. Margaret was a remarkable woman, a kindergarten teacher who inspired hundreds of children over 28 years. She passed away 8 years ago after a long fight with cancer. Soft murmurs moved through the crowd. Several nodded respectfully. During Margaret's illness, we spent everything trying to save her. Caroline watched as our savings disappeared, believing her father had thrown away his future out of love. After Margaret's death, she assumed I was broke, a failure who had gambled everything on treatments that didn't work. More nods. People felt sympathy for the grieving widower who'd sacrificed everything. For 8 years, I let her believe that. I let her think I was struggling, that I lived in a small apartment, drove an old car, and shopped at discount stores because I had no other choice. I let her believe she was marrying above her station when she met Reginald, that she was fortunate to be accepted into a wealthy family. I reached into my jacket and pulled out both phones. But before I continue, you should hear something. A recording Margaret made 3 days before she died, asking me to share it under certain circumstances. Caroline stood abruptly. Dad, maybe we should... Sit down, Caroline. My voice stayed calm, but with an edge that froze her in place. You just gave a speech claiming your mother died ashamed of the man she married. Grateful you found a real father figure in Whitman. You spoke of leaving the past behind, but I think everyone here deserves to know what your mother actually said about you in her final days. The room was silent. You could hear a pin drop. This recording is dated January 12, 2016, 3 days before Margaret Thompson passed. She made it specifically for this moment. Caroline's lips moved soundlessly. After you hear your mother's own words about her daughter, I'll share a few other things. About success, about class, about who has truly risen above their circumstances. I pressed play. Margaret's weak yet steady voice echoed through the reception hall's sound system. Matt, if you're hearing this, it means I'm gone. And Caroline has likely crossed the line I warned you about. The room of 180 guests fell completely silent. The final measure had just been triggered. Margaret's voice played on, clear and direct. She's become not only selfish, Matt, but cruel. Last week, while a nurse was helping me to the bathroom, Caroline asked when I was finally going to die so you could return to a normal life. Those were her exact words. Gasps rippled through the room. Caroline's face went pale. She told me she felt embarrassed to bring friends home because of how pathetic you had become. She even said she wished she had been born into a different, more successful family. Several guests turned to stare at Caroline as Reginald's hand tightened on her shoulder. Margaret's voice grew stronger. I overheard her on the phone with that Sterling boy, Matt. She was laughing about how her working-class father would never fit into their world. She said she was thankful she got her intelligence from my side of the family because your genes were clearly limited. Whitman Sterling Jr.'s face darkened. His attention shifted to Caroline. I'm afraid, Matt, not of dying, but of who she's becoming. Promise me you won't enable her with money after I'm gone. Promise me you'll make her earn her character the hard way. The recording stopped. I looked out over 180 silent faces. That was your mother's final wish. Caroline, that I not spoil you with money, but let you build character through effort. I raised my phone for all to see. For 8 years I honored that wish. I let you believe we were broke. I watched you work for everything, hoping you'd develop empathy and humility, the traits your mother valued. Caroline tried to speak. Dad, I'm not finished. I cut her off, my voice sharp. Instead, you've become exactly what your mother feared. Someone who values wealth over character. Someone willing to dishonor the dead for approval. I opened my Chase Bank app and held my phone high enough for the front tables to see. Let me share a few facts tonight about success and achievement. Reading from the screen, I continued. My current checking account balance is $33,187,402. The silence deepened. My investment portfolio, managed by Goldman Sachs, stands at $41,293,000. Whitman Sterling Jr. gripped his wine glass so tightly his knuckles whitened. I took a printed document from my jacket. This is my military service record. I held top-secret clearance for 15 years as a Pentagon contractor specializing in cyber defense. The project I completed in 2019 was the largest single contractor award in U.S. military history, $47.5 million. Several members of the Sterling family stared down at their plates. But this is my favorite document. I held up another paper. This is the deed for the estate at 247 Meadowbrook Lane in Greenwich, Connecticut. Some of you may recognize the address. Whitman Sterling Jr. went completely pale. It's the Sterling family's ancestral home, the 12-bedroom mansion they've lived in for 4 generations. Except they don't own it. I looked directly at Whitman. I do. I bought it in 2009 when your railroad fortune collapsed and you faced bankruptcy. You've been renting it from me for $1 per year under a charitable arrangement to help you save face. Patricia Sterling let out a choking sound. The property is currently valued at $8.2 million. I pay the $63,000 in taxes annually, plus about $40,000 a year in maintenance. I turned back to Caroline. Would you like to know what else I've been paying for? She was crying now, mascara streaking her cheeks. I opened a spreadsheet on my phone. Your student loans, anonymous cashier's checks totaling $87,000 over 6 years. Your credit card payments when you max them out, $43,000. Your apartment deposits and rent assistance, $91,000. Your car payments, insurance, and maintenance for that BMW X5, $26,000. I paused. Total anonymous financial assistance to Caroline Thompson over 8 years, $247,000. The numbers hung in the air like a quiet accusation. Every month I let you struggle just enough to think you were earning your way. Every month I made sure you didn't actually fail. And every month I hoped you'd develop the character your mother wanted. I scanned the room. Instead, tonight you stood at this podium and told 180 people your mother died ashamed of me, that I was a failure who never amounted to anything. My voice softened, but the microphone carried every word. Your mother didn't die ashamed of me, Caroline. She died worried about you. Caroline sobbed openly now. Reginald looked like he wanted to disappear, but I wasn't finished. I pulled out one last document. This morning I met with my estate attorney. This is a revised will, executed and notarized as of 3:30 p.m. today. I held it up for all to see. My previous will left everything to Caroline, my houses, my investments, my military pension. All of it, approximately $74 million. Caroline looked up through her tears, a spark of hope in her eyes. My revised will leaves Caroline exactly ones, the same amount her in-laws pay in rent. The flicker of hope vanished instantly. The remainder goes to the American Cancer Society in memory of Margaret Thompson, a woman who valued integrity over wealth and compassion over status. I folded the will and returned it to my jacket. These changes take effect immediately with my verbal confirmation, which I am giving now, before all present. I glanced at Caroline one last time. Congratulations on your marriage, sweetheart. You finally achieved what you always wanted, connection to a family with money and social standing. I nodded toward the Sterling table, where Whitman Jr. was staring into his wine glass as if it held poison. Of course, now that you know who truly owns their house, Thanksgiving might feel a bit uncomfortable. I unplugged Margaret's phone from the speakers and gathered both devices. Enjoy the rest of your reception. The bar is already paid for. I left the microphone behind, walking away from the wreckage of my daughter's new life. I had gone no more than 15 feet before chaos erupted. Caroline's scream pierced the silence. Not a sob, but a raw cry of anguish that made half the room recoil. You can't do this. You can't just ruin my life. She stood now, her $15,000 gown creased from clutching the fabric, mascara streaking her cheeks in black trails. 30 years! I've been your daughter for 30 years and you destroy me in front of everyone. I turned back, my tone steady. 8 years, Caroline. 8 years you let me believe your mother died ashamed of me. I never said that. I lifted Margaret's phone again. Would you like me to replay it? I have the exact timestamp where your mother repeats your words about her dying ashamed. Caroline's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. That was when Reginald spoke. Now wait just a minute. He rose, face flushed with either fury or humiliation. You can't come to our wedding and humiliate my wife with a fabricated recording. Fabricated? I opened the voice recording app and displayed the timestamp and file details. January 12th, 2016, 11:47 p.m. Original iPhone audio, unedited. I can provide the digital signature and metadata to any forensic expert you choose. Finally, Whitman Sterling Jr. stood, hands trembling. The property deed must be forged. Our family has owned that estate since 1924. I opened the Connecticut Property Records app. Would you like me to show the public records? Property transfers are public, Whitman. So is your 2009 bankruptcy filing. Shall I pull that up as well? His face drained from red to gray. You son of a, he whispered. My mother was a saint, I said calmly, unlike some others here. That was when Patricia Sterling, Whitman's wife, broke down in uncontrollable sobs, drawing the attention of everyone present. 40 years, she cried. 40 years we've told people about our estate, our heritage, our legacy. Around the room, society families were staring at their phones, likely verifying my claims. We're ruined. Completely ruined. Caroline found her voice again. All those anonymous payments, you were spying on me, tracking my finances. I was helping you, Caroline, every month for 8 years. I never asked for your help. No, but you cashed the checks. Guests were openly filming now, some live streaming to Instagram and TikTok. Brandon, a hedge fund analyst and Reginald's groomsman, broke the tension. Dude, your father-in-law owns your house. That's hilarious. Shut up, Brandon, Reginald snapped. No, really. This is like watching a live Netflix documentary, the broke dad who's secretly richer than all of us combined. Brandon held his phone high, capturing everything. This'll be everywhere by midnight. I noticed something shifting among the other guests. Those outside the Sterling circle, the people not tied to old money, were beginning to smile. A woman at table 6 stood and began clapping. Then table 3 joined. Within half a minute, half the hall was applauding, the half not tied to either family, witnessing an underdog victory. The Sterlings looked humiliated. Their yacht club and country club friends were frantically texting, no doubt scrambling to distance themselves from the unfolding disaster. Caroline saw the applause and lost all composure. Stop clapping! This isn't funny! He just destroyed my family! She turned to me, eyes filled with hatred. I hope you're happy, Dad. I hope this was worth it. It was, Caroline, I replied evenly. Your mother made me promise to set boundaries if you ever crossed certain lines. Tonight, you crossed the biggest one. What line? Using her memory as a weapon against the man who loved her most. That silenced her. Reginald was now on his phone, likely calling lawyers or financial advisors. Whitman Jr. collapsed into his chair, staring blankly. Patricia continued to sob into her napkin. The DJ, overwhelmed, made the mistake of asking if anyone wanted a song request. Brandon shouted, "Play Money Can't Buy Me Love by the Beatles." Laughter broke out across the hall. Caroline screamed again. I decided it was time to leave. I walked toward the exit, past tables where guests were either cheering, filming, or sitting in stunned silence. As I reached the door, Caroline's voice rang out once more. Don't you dare walk away from me. We're not done. I turned back, meeting her gaze across the room. My daughter, in her elegant gown, surrounded by the ruins of her new family's reputation. Yes, Caroline, we are. I walked out into the Connecticut night, leaving behind 8 years of silence and 33 years of fatherhood. The valet brought me my 2012 Honda Civic. I tipped him $20 and drove back to my small condo, believing it was finally over. But the real consequences were only beginning. At 11:30 p.m., my phone rang. Caroline, Dad, please. We need to talk. Her voice sounded different, softer, stripped of arrogance, almost like the little girl I'd once raised. There's nothing left to discuss, Caroline. Please. Just 5 minutes. I'm in the parking lot of your condo. I looked outside. Sure enough, her black BMW X5 was under the streetlight, the one I'd been making payments on for 3 years. Against my better judgment, I went down. Caroline leaned against the car, still in her wedding dress. Her makeup was gone, her hair falling loose, her face aged by 10 years in 3 hours. The reception ended at 9:45, she said quietly. Half the guests left after your speech. The rest stayed to film the Sterling's collapse. I stayed silent. Reginald's parents are talking about annulment. They're claiming I committed fraud by not disclosing our real financial status. Like being rich is something you're supposed to disclose. She gave a bitter laugh. Want to know the funniest part? Reginald's angrier about the money than the humiliation. 2 years telling his friends he was marrying down for love. Turns out he was marrying up all along. Caroline, no, let me finish. She finally met my eyes. And for the first time in 8 years, I saw Margaret in her expression. I listened to Mom's recording again. Reginald filmed your entire speech. I've watched it 6 times. She was right about me, wasn't she? About what I was becoming. For a moment, I felt hope. Maybe this was the moment Margaret had always hoped for. Perhaps losing everything would finally teach Caroline the lessons money never could. But my expression turned stern. That doesn't make what you did tonight acceptable. You embarrassed me in front of everyone I know. You ended my marriage before it even began. You made me look like a fool. No, Caroline. You made yourself look foolish. I only revealed the truth you uncovered by lying to me for 8 years. Her voice rose with anger. Do you have any idea what this will do to my career, to my reputation? By tomorrow, everyone in Greenwich will know that my father owns the Sterling estate, and that everything I've built came from hidden family money. That's something you should have thought about before giving that speech, I replied. I just wanted to fit in. I wanted to show them I belonged, by discrediting your mother's memory, I said sharply. That stopped her in her tracks. We stood in silence for half a minute, the only sound a distant police siren in Stamford. When Caroline finally spoke, her voice was ice cold. I want you to know I'll never forgive you. Ever. I understand, I said calmly. I'll contest the will. I'll hire the best attorneys in Connecticut and prove you were mentally unfit when you changed it. The will was reviewed by 3 lawyers and a psychiatrist, all of whom confirmed I was of sound mind and acting on predetermined decisions made years ago. Her face faltered as she realized I had prepared for this outcome. You really thought of everything, didn't you? Your mother and I discussed this in detail before she passed. We both hoped it would never come to this. Caroline stared at me for a long moment, then got into her BMW. Before driving away, she rolled down the window. Do you know what hurts the most, Dad? I actually loved you. Despite the embarrassment, despite thinking you were a failure, I still loved you. But after tonight, you're dead to me. Just like Mom. She drove off into the night, leaving me standing alone under a streetlight in the empty parking lot. I returned to my small condo, made coffee, sat in my recliner, and thought about Margaret, about the promise I made to her 8 years ago, about the choice between enabling Caroline's cruelty and honoring a dying woman's last wish. At 12:47 a.m., my phone buzzed with a news alert. Wedding reception revenge goes viral. Daughter humiliates broke father. Discovers he owns her in-laws' estate. The story was already on 3 Connecticut stations and trending on Twitter under Shatters wedding revenge. I turned off my phone and went to bed. Some lessons are worth $74 million 6 months later. I sat in my financial advisor's office signing papers for the largest charitable donation in Connecticut cancer research history, $73.9 million to the American Cancer Society, in memory of Margaret Thompson. The remaining $100,000 was enough for me to live quietly in my condo for the rest of my life. Are you certain, Matt? This can't be undone, my advisor asked. I've never been more certain. The news faded after 2 weeks. But the Sterling family's social downfall lasted far longer. Whitman Sterling Jr. lost memberships at 3 country clubs. Patricia Sterling was quietly asked to step down from the charity board she had chaired for over a decade. Reginald filed for annulment just 37 days after the wedding, citing fraudulent misrepresentation. Caroline didn't contest it. The evidence was too public. The confrontation video reached 2.3 million views on YouTube. Caroline moved to Portland, found work at a small marketing firm, and locked down her social media. She deleted most photos from the wedding and never reached out again. The Sterlings still live in my estate for $1 a year. Patricia sent me a handwritten apology 3 months ago, asking for reconciliation. I haven't responded. Some argue I went too far, that public humiliation was cruel no matter what Caroline had done. That one night of reckless behavior didn't deserve to destroy an entire family. But those people never heard Margaret's recording. They never saw a child weaponize a parent's death for status. They never spent 8 years carrying out a dying woman's final request, only to watch it mocked for applause. I sleep soundly. The Cancer Research Foundation updates me quarterly with reports on new trials and family support programs funded by the donation. Last month, they sent me a photo from their gala, with a banner reading, "The Margaret Thompson Memorial Research Wing." Margaret would have loved it. She always said the best way to fight death was to help others live. I keep her rose gold iPhone by my nightstand. Sometimes, I play her old voice memos, the cheerful ones, where she laughs with Caroline after school, where she dreams about her daughter's future. She never lived to see how it turned out. Maybe that's for the best. If you like this story, explore more in my playlist. Sometimes the quietest person in the room has more influence than anyone expects. And sometimes, the most valuable lessons are the ones that cost the most.